You know you're not part of the plan anymore when your boss introduces the team without saying your name. It was a Tuesday, the kind where the rain in Portland doesn't fall, it just hangs in the air like judgment. I sat near the back of the third-floor atrium, half listening to Miles Renner, the new CEO, stand in front of the company town hall with that startup smirk of his. He was 38, freshly imported from San Francisco, a darling of clean tech investors, and absolutely in love with the sound of his own voice. Greenspan is about the future, he declared, pacing like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. It's not just a platform, it's a mindset. And we're bringing in a leadership culture that reflects where the energy world is going. Young, agile, forward-facing. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, watching him gesture toward a slide titled, "The New Face of the Future." 6 faces appeared beside him on the screen, engineers, leads, managers. All under 40, all new blood. I wasn't one of them. And yet I was the one who had built the Greenspan core engine, the codebase that coordinated wind, solar, and storage inputs across 3 time zones in real time. The system they were currently demoing to federal regulators and European partners. The same system that had saved the company from going under 5 years ago when we were still operating out of a warehouse with more leaks than funding. But no one in the audience looked at me. Not even the ones I'd mentored. Not even when Miles said the line, "We're sunsetting legacy structures, including legacy roles." The sentence dropped like a lead weight. Someone in the front row clapped. A few others followed. And just like that, the slow erasure had turned into something public. Formal, almost celebratory. I didn't blink, I didn't flinch. I just smiled into my coffee cup. Because while they were busy painting me out of the picture, I was already sketching my own version of the ending. Before the glossy investor decks and sleek demo rooms, there was just a spreadsheet, a stubborn idea, and a server rack that ran too hot every August. Greenspan wasn't born in a lab. It was born in a shipping container behind the old Portland plant, back when the company was still called Gridfront, and no one outside Oregon knew our name. We had no funding, no market share, and definitely no exit plan. Just 6 engineers, too much caffeine, and a belief that real-time energy distribution could be smarter, faster. I was the only one in my 40s at the time. Most of them thought in code, but panicked at the idea of systems thinking. I wasn't the loudest in the room, but I was the one who saw how everything needed to talk to everything, wind turbines to weather, APIs, solar storage to peak demand models, so I built the brain. The core routing algorithm that eventually became the heart of Greenspan. I wrote that in 3 weeks, mostly at night, mostly at home. My kid was in 3rd grade then. I remember debugging version 1.3 on the kitchen counter, while she built a cardboard solar farm next to me for her science fair. She won a ribbon. I won 6 hours of sleep. Those were the quiet years, the good kind of hard. Later, when the state utility contracts came in and investors started calling, they finally gave the system a name, Greenspan. Not my suggestion, not named after anyone really, but it stuck. My code stayed invisible, of course. The system worked too well to draw attention. By the time the company rebranded, we were powering 14 cities during peak hours. The Department of Energy flew in for a site visit. And somewhere along the way, I stopped getting invited to meetings with press or partners. I didn't mind. I never cared about being the face of anything. I just wanted the grid to stop bleeding power every time a cloud passed over a solar array. But it turns out when something runs too smoothly, people assume it runs itself. And when something becomes valuable, they start asking who really built it. It's funny. They always circle back eventually, except this time they didn't circle. They replaced. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about being replaced in polite company. They do it in increments, quietly, efficiently, with just enough plausible deniability to call it organizational realignment. The first sign was my team disappearing. One by one, the junior engineers I'd mentored, people I'd stayed late with, helped clean up broken integrations for, were reassigned to cross-functional pods. I was told it was part of a new agile initiative spearheaded by Miles. Breaking down silos, they said. Empowering vertical ownership. Translation, I was the silo. Then came the meetings. I stopped receiving invites to roadmap reviews. Architecture sessions happened without me. I found out about key infrastructure changes from internal newsletters, ones that started calling me Elaine Mercer, one of the early contributors to the Greenspan project. One of. Like I was part of a class photo nobody really looked at anymore. I asked Miles about it once, casually, in the elevator no less. He smiled like I'd complimented his shoes. You're a legend, Elaine. You've earned the right to step back. Let the new guard carry the torch. The new guard. He meant people like Camden 29 Sharp, ambitious and newly promoted to systems strategist. A title that didn't exist 2 weeks before it landed on his LinkedIn. I'd trained Camden 2 years ago when he struggled to understand our load balancing protocol. Last week, he presented my own fallback module to the VP of product as a next-gen failover strategy. He didn't even change the variable names, but he had something I didn't: youth buzzwords and backing. By then, I knew better than to fight it directly. That's what they wanted, some angry outburst to fast-track my exit. A chance to write me off as resistant to change. So I played along, I smiled in meetings, I offered feedback when asked. I stayed late to clean up Camden's botched load test and left no trace. I let them think I'd gone quiet, because I wasn't interested in being loud anymore. I was interested in being exact. And they had just made the one mistake you should never make with an engineer who builds quietly. They forgot I still had access. The moment I knew they were rewriting history came in the form of a PowerPoint. It was the quarterly demo day Greenspan's internal showcase. Once upon a time, I ran those events. Now I sat in the third row badge, clipped low, with no speaking slot and no team to stand beside. Camden was center stage. He wore a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to seem hands-on, mic clipped neatly to his collar. He spoke with the confidence of someone who thought reciting architecture diagrams counted as designing them. This, he said, gesturing to a slide titled Dynamic Grid Rebalancing 2.0, is what sets Greenspan apart. Our next-gen system doesn't just respond to demand, it predicts and reallocates based on live environmental inputs across trizonal boundaries. Applause followed. I stared at the diagram, my diagram. Same node architecture, same redundancy patterns. Even the rounded corners I'd used on a whiteboard sketch 10 months ago. He never said my name, no one did. Then came the chart, the one showing a 37% increase in failover efficiency compared to baseline. A baseline I had personally built, tested, and quietly patched after the first blackout simulation nearly crashed the entire ops sandbox. I'd worked on that fix over a long weekend, typing by candlelight, after a citywide outage took down our grid. Camden pointed at the spike in performance and said, "This is the result of our new gen team's clean sheet rebuild strategy." I clenched my jaw. From the corner of my eye, I caught someone shift uncomfortably. Jill from DevOps. She knew. She'd seen my original patch notes, but she didn't speak, because no one speaks when the erasure is happening in high definition. The final blow came when Miles took the mic. He stood beside Camden and smiled wide for the company photographer. "We're proud to say Greenspan X is a fully reimagined system," he said, "built by the next generation of engineers, rooted in forward vision. No mention of the foundation, no mention of the one who built it." That afternoon, I walked past the break room and saw a framed poster hung on the wall. Progress means knowing when to let go. It was meant to be inspiring. Instead, it felt like a warning. And warnings, I read carefully. The calendar invite arrived at 8:02 a.m. Subject line: strategic realignment, executive sync, HR participation required. That's how they do it now. Not a knock, not a call, just a vague block of text with forced neutrality and no chance to ask questions in advance. I showed up early anyway. I wore navy, clean, professional, forgettable, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Not because I expected fairness, but because women my age are trained to walk into corporate funerals looking unbothered. Miles was already seated when I walked in, arms folded like he was bracing for turbulence. Melinda from HR stood nearby, clutching a manila folder like it might bite her. Elaine Miles began clearing his throat first. "Thank you. Truly, your contributions to Gridfront and later Greenspan have been foundational." I nodded once, expressionless. "But as you know," he continued, "we're evolving. And as part of that evolution, we're consolidating legacy roles to better align with our forward trajectory." There it was again, that word, legacy. A compliment in past tense, a knife dipped in honey. Melinda stepped forward. "We've prepared a generous exit package," she said, flipping open the folder. 6 months salary, full COBRA coverage through Q2, and access to a transition coach. They always add the coach as if what you need after being erased is someone to help you rebrand yourself as grateful. I didn't ask questions. I didn't argue. I just signed the acknowledgement receipt and passed it back. Miles looked relieved, like he expected me to cry or yell or beg. But I wasn't shocked. I was ready. At 5:15 that evening, I returned to my office. The hallway lights flickered as if the building itself knew what was happening. My nameplate was already gone. Just a blank strip of brushed metal. Inside, the air smelled like lemon wipes and vacancy. They'd cleared the desk, boxed my photos, even reset the chair height. My inbox was scrubbed slack, access revoked. The door badge beeped red on my way to the elevator. Still, I stood tall, because while they thought they were locking me out, they didn't know I'd taken the only key that ever mattered with me. The next version of Greenspan, the one they were trying to sell, didn't live on their servers. It lived in my hands. They thought I'd fade. They thought the severance, the silence, the softly worded exit folder would be the end of me. But I hadn't spent 18 years building a system just to leave quietly. What they didn't know, what no one in that glossy glass office knew, was that I'd already moved on. 6 months ago, when Camden's team rejected my proposal for a multi-layered predictive balancing engine, said it was too complex for implementation, I didn't argue. I just went home and built it. Version 1.0 of Greenspan Nova ran from a laptop older than Camden's resume. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Nights and weekends I tested, iterated, documented. Every line of code time-stamped. Every design sketch scanned and archived. Every system behavior compared against the current version they still hadn't fixed. I did it the right way, not just technically, but legally. Back in 2006, when I first joined Gridfront, I'd reviewed the IP clause in the offer letter myself. Anything developed outside of company hours and without use of company equipment remained sole property of the employee. And guess what? They never updated the contract. Not once. For 17 years, I had never needed to use that clause. Until now. Greenspan Nova wasn't just an idea. It was fully functional, more efficient, scalable, built on principles they didn't understand because they never bothered to learn them. It had fault-tolerant logic they still hadn't figured out, and I had every right to do what came next. I didn't rush. I backed everything up cloud drive hard copies in a lockbox. I called Ren Carter, an old college friend turned IP attorney in Seattle. She took one look at the repository and whistled. "Elaine, this is gold. You didn't just document, this is cleaner than half the startups I represent. You're standing on a mountain." I nodded. "I'm not here to burn anything," I said. "Just to plant a flag before they try to sell what I already own." By Friday, the provisional patent was filed. By the following Tuesday, I had a meeting set with Voltaris Greenspan's largest competitor and their hungriest, and still not a single person at Gridfront knew what I had built. They thought they fired a relic. What they fired was the owner of their future. Voltaris didn't ask many questions. Not once they saw the demo. The first meeting was held in a private conference room overlooking downtown Seattle. Glass walls, silent HVAC, not a single unnecessary word. I showed them the architecture map, ran the live simulation, and watched the CTO's eyebrows rise with every efficiency spike. "This," she said, tapping the screen, "is what they're promising in 2 years. You have it now." I nodded. "Fully operational. Scales to multi-state infrastructure. And yes, built outside company resources, IP is clean." The legal director, a quiet man in round glasses, cleared his throat. "You filed already last Friday," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "Provisional patent, full documentation, signed statement of authorship." They flipped through the packet. 10 seconds of silence. Then the COO smiled. "We'd like to proceed to exclusive licensing." We didn't toast. No one stood up and shook hands like in movies. We just got to work. Their legal team began drafting the licensing agreement that afternoon. By Thursday, the document was finalized. Voltaris would license Greenspan Nova exclusively with my name listed as sole inventor and lead architect. I would retain technical authorship credit on all publications and patents and serve as a strategic advisor during rollout. No more watching others present my work. No more erasure. They asked when I wanted to go public. I smiled. "Next Monday," I said. "Gridfront's IPO press week." They blinked, then grinned. "Understood." Back in Portland, Gridfront's headquarters was humming with activity. New signage, new marketing banners. Miles had been quoted in Clean Energy Weekly saying, We're not just building a product, we're defining an era. I clipped the article, saved it to a folder on my desktop. Label fuel. Friday afternoon, I returned to the office one last time to wrap up transition logistics, as Melinda called it. I handed her the signed NDA, carefully redlined. She didn't read it, just smiled and said, "Thank you for being so professional through all this, Elaine." I smiled back. "You're welcome," I thought. "You have no idea what you're thanking me for." Gridfront's IPO press briefing was scheduled for Monday, 9:00 a.m. sharp. At 8:00 a.m., their media kit dropped polished pitch decks, promo videos, and a quote from Miles himself on page 1. Greenspan X is our next leap, built from the ground up by a new generation of engineers. At 8:15, Voltaris released their own press statement. The headline landed like thunder. Voltaris secures exclusive license to next-gen energy platform, built by former Gridfront architect. Subheadline: patent filed under Elaine Mercer for full rights to predictive balancing architecture featured in upcoming Gridfront product. By 8:22, my inbox lit up like a switchboard. "Elaine, did you really? Please call me. Urgent. They're freaking out in the war room." By 8:27, a text from Jill in DevOps. Miles stormed out of the boardroom. Camden looks like he's about to faint. At 8:34, a push notification from CleanTech Bulletin: Gridfront's IPO faces questions. Amidst IP dispute with former lead architect. I didn't reply to anyone. I sat in my new office at Voltaris, sipping dark roast, watching the industry scramble. At 9:03, a direct email from Miles. Subject: misunderstanding. "Elaine, there seems to be some confusion regarding the overlap in frameworks. Could we connect today to clarify IP boundaries? Respectfully, Miles Renner." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my attorney with one line: loop him in. By 10:00 a.m., 3 major outlets were running the story. The patent number was public. So was the license agreement. So was my name. At 11:15, Gridfront's IPO livestream was quietly canceled. No press conference, no reschedule, just a silent technical difficulties screen and a locked comments section. Investors pulled out. Analysts went digging. Journalists started asking why the company's flagship system had no inventor named in their filings. And for the first time in 18 years, my name wasn't hidden. It was everywhere. By Wednesday, it wasn't just tech media talking. Bloomberg Clean Energy ran a full segment titled "Gridfront's Missing Inventor," the IP oversight that shook a $900 million launch. A day later, I was invited to keynote the National Grid Innovation Summit. Topic: owning the foundation, innovation attribution, and what happens when they forget who built the system. I didn't accept right away. I waited. Let them come to me. On Friday afternoon, a quiet update appeared on Gridfront's LinkedIn. Miles Renner has stepped down as CEO effective immediately. No farewell post, no video montage. Just 2 sentences, and the comments turned off. Camden's profile vanished the next day. His posts were wiped and word leaked that he was under internal review for misrepresentation of authorship. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because by then something else had started. Emails, dozens, from women in tech, from older engineers, from people who'd spent years building things in silence, only to watch someone else take the mic. One message read, "I watched them erase you, and I watched you make them remember." Another simply said, "They called me outdated last year. Today, I filed my first patent." That was the real win. Not the licensing deal, not the headlines, not even the title on the patent registry. It was knowing that somewhere someone who had been made invisible was now writing their name in permanent ink. A year to the day after I was erased, I stepped onto a stage in Denver, facing an auditorium full of engineers, founders, and policymakers. Behind me, a screen read, "Elaine Mercer, inventor of the Nova framework." I looked out at the crowd, and I began. They called me a legacy. What they forgot is that you can't sell the future without the woman who built its bones.